Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host, and we have with us a longtime good brother, Rabbi. I can just refer to him as Rabbi. I don't really know how to properly pronounce your last name. I'm always saying Litvin.
Litvin is right.
Litvin's right? Okay. Rabbi Litvin. I know your brother, too. I was at the teaching a little chess there one year at the Jewish day school. And speaking to my listeners, I bring the rabbi on. Well, I need to bring him on more often to talk about things that I think are extremely important. I mean, he gives a perspective that many of my other speakers, just can't do. And today, we're going to talk about Black community, Jewish community relations. And I'm just going to start it off like that, asking the rabbi, Rabbi, just, go ahead and punch your ball.
So the relationship between the Jewish and African American community has been remarkable going back for generations. There's a note that came out recently from a newspaper, a New York newspaper from 70 years ago. And it talks about the people who helped the Jewish community on Shabbos, on the Jewish Sabbath. There are 39 things that Jews cannot do. The 39 things that were done for the building of the temple could not be done on Shabbos. So they would often, it was customary in a Jewish community to have a non-Jew who would be paid a small amount to help with those things on Shabbos if anything needed to be done. And the Shabbos Goyim, so the Shabbos assistants, went on strike in Louisville, Kentucky. And it mentioned in this little blurb that almost all of them are African American.
Wow.
So the links between the communities are very old. For me personally, it's a personal matter. When my father was asked by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, my personal mentor and the foremost leader of world Judaism, to move to Kentucky to help lead the Jewish community, my grandfather's first reaction was to think back to his time in Kentucky fighting for civil rights 25 years earlier. He ended up in Jewish hospital. So he had negative memories of Louisville and was concerned about my father moving there. My father assured him that Louisville has to have changed a little bit in 25 years. And I think we have a little bit, just a little bit. And hopefully in the 25 and the more than that, since my dad moved, we've moved a little more. But certainly the relation to the community was something I was aware of growing up. I have a very strong memory of a Sabbath afternoon in my childhood when my father had welcomed the first African-American family into our suburb. We grew up across the street from Big Springs golf course, which I grew up calling Bigot Springs because at the time they didn't let Jewish members. So it was there were some Jews in the neighborhood, but a very white neighborhood. And my father helped the first African-American family move into the neighborhood. And I remember a neighbor accosting my father on Saturday afternoon as he stood in front of his house, yelling at him with racial slurs, "How dare you let these people into our neighborhood?" So they said, "How dare you let this with an expletive family into our neighborhood?" He said, "Actually, their name is Johnson. You're pronouncing it wrong." So he just had a quick response that these are just people. And so the Jewish community has long been involved in civil rights. It hasn't always been from the best places. Unfortunately, something that plagues many groups to get involved in civil rights that thinks I'm helping someone else with their issue. Dr. King never spoke about being anti-racist. He spoke about building a beloved community. He pushed others that when you get involved in the civil rights movement, you're not only benefiting the Black community, the Hispanic community, the immigrant community, you're benefiting your community. Because by having those members, my life is richer for having you as a friend. So having a diverse community doesn't only benefit those that you lift up. By lifting others up, you uplift the entire community. The Rabbi taught that all the time. There's one thing that jumps to mind following the riots led by Al Sharpton in Crown Heights in the early 90s, which many would call a pogrom, a loud attack against Jews. David Dinkins, who was the mayor of New York, came to visit Lubavitcher Rebbe and asked him, how could we bring these two communities together? And the Rebbe said, you got to stop thinking about it as two communities. It's Crown Heights. We're one community. And there's all sorts of members in that community. We're coming from different backgrounds, different places, etc. But you have to try and uplift the entire community, and that's how you bring it together. There's a story that I tell all the time, and there's an incredible library here in Lexington, the Luna Library, which helps to bring stories that center on African Americans to children here in Lexington, run by Devon Karma, who's an amazing activist here in Lexington. And I recently ordered some books for them about Jeff Davis. Jeffrey Davis is a alderman and city leader, city councilman, I believe, in New York. And he and his brother grew up in Crown Heights, just a few blocks from the Central Synagogue. And he tells a story often of him and his brother playing in front of their building, and one of them hit the other one. And he said an old man stopped and he said, "Love your brother like you love yourself, and if you love your brother, stop the violence." And as his brother grew up and saw the violence plaguing the community, that became a slogan for him. Love your brother, stop the violence. And unfortunately, his brother was murdered by a gunman, and he continued to carry that legacy. He has a book called Love Your Brother, Stop the Violence. And it's something and he later found out that this old man who he didn't know who it was the Rabbi, was the leader of the Jewish community. So that concept of the two communities working together is something that's incredibly important to me. So the Rebbe who I mentioned, tomorrow was actually the 70th anniversary of when he accepted the mantle of leadership. And on that day, when his inauguration speech, if you would, what he spoke about was individual acts to reach out to people, not changing the world, but how each of his predecessors had reached one person. So very often, the way the communities come together is not some grand gesture. Let's all get together for a picnic or something like that. But it's individual relationships and building allies who can work together on matters. And that's so important time and time again. I know that following the awful attack at Tree of Life, my brother reached out to some friends. They were bringing together an event at 4th Street Live. And one of the first people to reach out and ask how they can help was Lincoln Bridge. So they're certainly not members of the Jewish community, although they're friends of my brother's. They said, how can we help any way we can? And it was incredibly amusing to the crowds. And it makes me smile every year when it comes to my Facebook memories, when the first song they broke out into was a Hanukkah song. Most people don't think, when they think of Lincoln Bridge's repertoire, being a Hanukkah song. But they were there. They were standing with us. And that's how communities come together, because you don't want to have one community helping another. There's a remarkable story about Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was a Russian rabbi. Most of the Jews in Russia were either white or white passing. And he was accused by a group of German Jews and Lithuanian Jews of sending money to help Turks and North Africans. And how they were saying it was, he's helping colored people. We're at war with the Ottoman Empire, and he's helping those people. When he was in court, he defended himself. I was sending it to my fellow Jews. I don't care what color a fellow Jew is. I don't care where they came from. They're starving. I sent them food. The idea that they're a different culture, a different color, never came up in his mind. To the point that he had never thought, should I not send the money because they're in a different country, they're in a different nationality, etc. We're one people. I need to prop them up. Yes. So that's true both within the Jewish community, which is an incredibly diverse community, and in the broader community. One project that I've been very blessed to be involved with is Project Friendship, which I think we've discussed in passing one or two times. My brother, who you mentioned, Rabbi Chaim, is the CEO, and it works with online retailers to get brand new clothing to people in need. And someone once asked him, which organizations are you looking for? Are you looking for churches, looking for hospitals, you're looking for, in the black community, in the immigrant community? He said, I'm looking for people who are looking to help people. I don't care who the people are. If you're looking to help people, I want to work with you. I'll work with any man to do good, and I'll work with no man to do evil. And when that's your outlook, that gives you a base to be able to work together, recognizing that we are one community uplifting each other.
Amen. This is I'm just speaking to my list. This is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host. This is a very important interview, and I particularly want to get this interview out. And which, here in this channel, folks, I try to give voice to Black conservatives, Black conservative organizations and movements. And I wanted to bring on the Rabbi to talk about Black community, Jewish community relationships. I mean, he can talk about this for hours. I mean, he can do a whole college course or two on it. But I wanted to get him on as long as I could, for this 15 minutes, because it's something I really believe that more in the Black community have to talk about. We have to talk about. And, Rabbi, I say, you'd already brought up, like with Al Sharpton, that was a little disturbing what happened there at that time, to say the least. I mean, there were signs in that march he was doing where they were saying, like, kill the Jews. And there were chants like that.
Pin your yarmulkes back and come to my house.
Oh my. Yeah. Isn't that what Reverend Sharpton said?
So that was certainly not out of character for him. He had used anti-Semitic slurs for years before that time, calling Jews Shylocks and diamond dealers. Mm-hmm. And it's not just him. Many people who are looking to separate communities point to something they call Black anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. I don't think that a hatred could be attributed to one person, to one kind of people. There mm-hmm. are anti-Semitic and bigoted and hateful people in any community you find. And there are voices. Unfortunately, one of the most prominent anti-Semitic voices in the country today is Louis Farrakhan, mm-hmm. whose cult of Nation of Islam is almost founded. One of the foundational stones is anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. Almost every one of his books mentions the Jews. I don't know why he loves me so much to write about me all the time, but he's obsessed with it. Here in Louisville, there's a group called IUIC Kentucky. Mm-hmm. IUIC. And they are strong believers that I'm not Jewish, but they are. And they're some flavor, I believe, of Black Hebrew Israelite.
Yeah, Black.
And they continuously tweet out remarkably anti-Semitic stuff. So it's not that there isn't any anti-Semitism in the Black community, and I'm certainly not saying there isn't racism in the Jewish community. The Pittsburgh Platform, one of the foundational documents of the original Reformed movement in America, rejected both Zion and the Jews of Zion, which were the dark Jews. Mm-hmm. So there certainly is racism within the Jewish community, like there is in nearly every community. And there certainly is anti-Semitism within the Black community, as there is in any community. The problem is when voices like the ones we've mentioned get uplifted, and the voices on the other side get put down.
Yes.
So there are incredible voices fighting for the communities to join together, fighting to bring people together. Richie Torres, for example, is a new congressman from New York. Richie Torres is often working as hard as he can to bring communities together, including the Jewish community, the Hispanic community, the Black community. However, it is very rare for his voice to be uplifted by those on Twitter. They prefer new Congress people like Omar or Talib, etc., who have a history of remarkably anti-Semitic statements.
Yes.
So the question is, do you want to bring people together or do you want to bring them apart? A quote I used earlier, I'll work with any man to do good, but with no man to do evil, is a quote from Frederick Douglass. Mm. It's remarkable that a man who was born in slavery would say that. Yes. I'm willing to work with anyone if it's a good cause.
Yes.
I want to do good in this world, and I will work with anyone to do that. The amount of grace that it takes in a man's soul to say that line, living in a country where he was once enslaved, is remarkable.
Yes.
It's almost inhuman to have that much grace, that much character. But that's something we all need to recognize, that not every voice from one community is that community. And what we need to do is try to bring people together, both on the individual level and on the collective level. Because when one of us rises, all of us rise. because we all benefit from, as Dr. King would call it, that beloved community. That community not where there isn't racism, but rather there is harmony. Not the absence of hate, but the presence of brotherhood.
Mm. Let me just stop you right there, Rabbi. This is a book talk with Corbin. I'm here with the Rabbi discussing a very important issue that I'm looking for more and more Black conservatives in the United States of America to take up. We need to discuss this more. We need to bring this out more. There's, again, we could talk about this for hours and hours. I was deeply concerned, Rabbi, how a few, maybe it's a year back, that some of the attacks we're seeing against folk in the Jewish community up in New York, the Democratic Party, seemingly like this person congressperson made a clearly anti-Semitic remark, and you can't condemn it. I don't know why they had the soft pedal and soft shoe and all, just condemn it. They weren't even saying remove her from office. They're just saying, hey, this is wrong. Don't say this kind of stuff again. We're not with it. But it just seemed like they were incapable of doing that. One of the major parties in the United States of America was not able to do that.
So that was certainly a failing. I do want to mention that it is, as I mentioned earlier, it is not the majority of the Democratic Party that has these anti-Semitic views. While tolerating them is also a problem, it's unfortunate that what society wants to do is lift those voices up to drive our communities together. Mm-hmm. Congressman Johnson from Georgia, who called Jews termites. They want to lift that voice up rather than lift up the voices of leaders in the Democratic Party, leaders in the Republican Party, leaders in the African-American community, the Hispanic community, et cetera, who stand together with their Jewish brothers.
Yes.
We had an attack recently at the Jewish Student Center at the University of Kentucky. I got a call the next day from the Attorney General. He said, how can I help? That was it. What can I do? That's the leadership that needs to be lifted up. And I got the same response from the governor's office. So there are plenty in both parties and plenty in all communities who are looking for those relationships, who are looking for that brotherhood. But there's an unfortunate tendency that we all have to pay attention to and to uplift those hateful voices that we should ignore.
Yes.
And that's something we all have to work on as a community and as individuals.
Now, I just want to say for our non-Kentucky listeners, the Attorney General the Rabbi was referring to was Daniel Cameron, and the governor he was referring to was Andy Beshear. Andy Beshear is a Democrat. Daniel Cameron is a Republican. So listen very carefully what the Rabbi is saying is, this is important, and we gotta grasp this, that we need to stop, as he's saying, uplifting the anti-Semitic voices, and we need to be uplifting more of the, I guess you might say, the brotherhood voices. The brotherhood voices. Now, we're going to have to conclude in a couple of minutes, Rabbi. I'm going to brag on you a little bit to my listeners. This brother, when he talks about his father, it's a fascinating story. Wasn't your father a jazz musician?
No, that's my grandfather.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jazz musician. So
played trumpet with Dizzy Gillespie and Louis Armstrong and Danny Kaye and Count Basie. I have a trumpet in my office that Louis Armstrong once played. Borrowed for him before he went on stage.
All right. So I guess you realize, that we pretty much adopted your grandfather into the Black community. I mean, that's it. He's got the credentials right there. I mean, that's amazing. And then I'm speaking to my listeners here. I was talking to the Rabbi. I said, Rabbi, you need to come on. And he said, well, I got this meeting with the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. The Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. And my father was recruited for the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. He was the director of an Urban League branch down in Warren, Ohio. And he was recruited for the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. And one of their first major goals was to desegregate housing. The Fair Housing Act, they passed that. It's one of the first. And so here it is, Rabbi, he's right there on the Kentucky Commission doing his work and doing his very important work. Rabbi, I need to conclude here. Please, let's get together again.
Absolutely.
Because I want to talk to you about this whole situation with Iran, the building in their nuclear program, and what kind of response the United States government needs to make in that. And again, in speaking to Black conservatives who listen to this channel, we need to be in the vanguard and defending Israel. We need to be in the vanguard. We just have to be. But before we can do that, we need to be informed. We need to be clear about these things, what's going on here. Rabbi, thank you so much.
Blessings, my friend. Take care.
Bless you.